Welcome to LED 510. My name's Jim Barton for those of you I haven't met before. For those of you I have, it's nice to be working with you again. I've been teaching this course for a number of years, and I'm anticipating it going well with you folks too. It's gone well in the past, and I really enjoy teaching this course. By the time I'm done this video, I'm hoping everything we're going to be doing makes complete sense. I'm also hoping you might have gotten an introductory email I sent out about a week ago before class, in hopes that it would give you a little orientation of where we're heading. If you didn't get it, and you go to the folder on our website that says Introductory Materials, that introductory email is there, and you can pause me at any point during the course of this video to check that out and just get some advance notice. Anyway, like I said, I'm glad to be doing this course with you, and it's changed, as I mentioned, quite a bit. The change has a lot to do with something that the School of Education implemented called the Professional Impact Program. This project is all about you, and it's changed the way I teach the course. In the past, I used to do this course as a typical lecture course, and we talk about reliability and validity and read a pretty boring textbook. And now the course is all about a project you're interested in. And by the way, this project will certify that you've completed something important for your program, and by doing this course, you'll have completed that project. So, the challenges of course, doing something like a professional impact project, which, like I said, is pretty complicated, were for me to arrange it to make it doable for you and for me in the time frame we have, and also to make it relevant to what you really care about and what matters to you in your work. So I'm going to help you do this project and walk through all the steps. And the reason I like doing this so much online is, first of all, it's very individualized. When we have class all together, I can't really focus on anyone's project, but when we do this online together, I can focus on everyone's, because every project's different. Another reason I like doing this online is we're not going to have to spend any of our time driving back and forth to campus or trying to find a place to park at RIC. And another reason I like it is it's very collaborative. I can see how you think online, you can see how I think, and we can put the two together. And again, by the time you're done doing this course, you'll have completed all the requirements for the Professional Impact Project. So let's think a little bit specifically about our plans. If you go back to that folder I mentioned in Blackboard, the Introductory Materials folder, and you click on the information there, there's a folder that talks about Action Research Study Design, a file within that folder that talks about that. And I'll give you a minute to pull that up. It's a one-page document. I'm just going to walk you through the steps of what we're going to do. And then we'll get more specific about how we're going to do it and when we're going to do it. So now that you've got that overview page in front of you, let's just talk about the parts of this. It'll narrow it down to exactly what we're going to be doing together, I promise. So as you can see, we start by establishing a research focus. Like I said, something you're interested in, something you care about, something you're puzzled by, something you want to know a lot more about. So as you can see here, my first bullet underneath establishing a research focus says, delving into an area of special interest. You might be asking yourself, I've been doing this thing that's so successful, how come? How can I replicate it or tell other people about it in a way that gets them to try it? Or you might have a major concern about your students' or your clients' development that you want to explore further. Or you might feel like you or the place you work is missing the boat about something important and you want to see if you can fill in some gaps. It's fair game to study yourself and your own practice, your students or your clients in terms of what they know, their knowledge, their thinking processes, how they think about things, and or their motivations, any combination of those three things. Basically what they know, how they think, and how much they care. Any of those are fair game to study. You can also study, if someone's willing to play along, somebody else's students or clients, or even your colleagues' beliefs and practices, again, if they're willing to take part. Most of my students end up studying their own practice, and in some ways their own clients, because that's the most accessible way to go about this. I'm down to the next step of our establishing a research focus, which is in terms of options. You're basically going to do one of two different kinds of study projects. One's going to be more descriptive, where you're trying to figure out what's really going on here, what's really happening. Or the second one is more interventional. What happens when I change something? If I change this, does it make it better in a way I want it to? Or does it have some unintended consequences too? An important caveat about that second one, because we don't have a huge chunk of time, this class could really run over 3 semesters. You're probably glad it doesn't, but it only runs 1 semester. And so we're not going to have a lot of time to do a lot of intervening, which means that if you can see a small change in the amount of time we've got, that means you're probably onto something significant that you can develop further in the future. The boundaries of this project. Well, first of all, it needs to relate to your professional life in a significant way. We don't want to spin your wheels and waste your time. Secondly, it's got to be something you know you're going to keep caring and learning about, something that you're not going to be one and done on, and then something you believe you can get some insight into in a relatively brief amount of time. Here I'm asking you to be really realistic about your time. You know what else is going on in your life, and you know what else you have to do professionally. One of the things a good researcher does is she or he finds ways to fit research into the rest of their practice. We don't want to turn this into a mountain of headache for you or an overwhelming part of work. So we want to be realistic about how much time you've got to really pull something off when we think about how much of a chunk you want to pull off to chew on for this project. Once we thought about those boundaries, I'm down to the bullet now beneath it. It says, developing some potential questions to answer and narrowing your focus. Usually people start out with 2 or 3 potential questions and start thinking about them. Once they get realistic about what it would take to gather the data, it gets narrowed down, almost like going through a funnel and comes out the bottom where you've still got a question you're really interested in, but now it seems more doable. I'm going to help you with that part, okay? And then to review the relevant literature and use it to refine your question. Once we know what your question is, we'll look for some support that helps you really think about how you're going to proceed. So that takes us down through the establishing a research focus. The next chunk of the study design is method. And that all begins with participants, thinking about who's going to help you research this. Who are you going to use as your study participants to really get an understanding about what your question was, and how many participants do you need, and how are you going to select them? And then the setting issue. Where's the best place to conduct your study, and why is this the best place? And again, as I mentioned, most people end up studying the people that they work around or with in the setting they normally work in, because when would you have time to go someplace else? If you do have a chance to go someplace else, that's fine with me, but chances are it's going to be right where you normally work. And then the materials question is the next bullet. Are there certain texts or tools or surveys that you can use to gather your data? Well, how are you going to go about accessing the data that you seek? And what happens frequently when people are thinking about materials is it changes the question. Sometimes the question gets refined a bit because it turns out the materials aren't available, or you don't have time to create something brand new, or you have created something brand new, and that shapes the question in some ways too. We'll get more into that too, I promise. And then the procedural part. That's almost like a recipe. What specific steps will I follow in terms of how will I go about collecting the data I seek? And like I said, we want to do it as a recipe so that you could follow it again and somebody else could follow it again if they wanted to try to replicate your study. The same thing as with materials, though. Sometimes once you start planning your procedure, it turns out that it's more complicated than you thought, and we have to go back and shift your question around a little bit. That's pretty typical in research. So that's all the method decisions we make. And we'll be making those together. Again, I promise lots of support in this. And then the last chunk of the action research study design is the results and conclusions. And that starts with data analysis. You think back to what your data sources were and think about how you're going to understand what you collected. A lot of studies start to go south at this point. People have a hard time linking up what the question was and what the data is and how the two tie together. So we'll be careful about that. And then I'm down to the next bullet, the results. So what exactly does the data say, and what doesn't it tell us? And in any study, there's going to be some places with gray areas, places where the data actually doesn't reflect everything we want to know. A good study raises as many questions as it answers. And then the conclusions piece. Now, conclusions are distinct from results. Results are exactly, objectively, what happened. And the conclusions are your interpretations about what it means. So, as you can see here, I've got some questions. What do my results mean for my practice? Because we want this to be practical, something you can use. And what about for other people's practice? What's it imply that might help other people in your field think about what they do? And what else do I still want to know about this topic now based on what I learned? And what's the plan for moving forward? How can you take it to the next step after this course is over? Those are all the pieces. We won't be doing anything beyond what I just listed on that page. That's exactly what we're doing, and not coincidentally, that's exactly what fulfills the Professional Impact Project. So, if that's making sense, let's think about in terms of time frame. What I did was I designed this so that this course, in terms of assignments, won't take any more time than doing the work for a traditional course. And in terms of actually conducting the study, I mean the part where you're going to go gather your data, that's not going to make any more time than attending the coursework that you'd normally attend each week for a more traditional course too. I try to make this reasonable for you and for me so it fits into the time frame we have available to us to do it in. So the next thing I want to do is review the assignments for this class. So if you can go down to the folder that says Course Syllabus on our Blackboard site, and once you've got to that, click on that, and then if you go to the last page of the syllabus first, which I know sounds a little counterintuitive, but let's begin with that last page because it's a summary of what we're going to do. So I'll give you a chance to do that. Once you've got that and you're looking at that last page, just at a quick glance, you'll notice that the bullets there match up very closely with the research study design we just went over, the parts of the puzzle. We're getting a little more specific now about exactly how we're going to do this stuff. So the first bullet says we're going to determine a specific issue to study. So then you'll explain what your research question is and why you're so interested in learning more about it. And again, I'm going to help you figure that out. I got some information there on the site to help you with that. So that's worth 10 points or 10% of the grade. And then I'm going to ask you to locate 2 published research studies to help you think more about this area and that help you think about what you're going to be doing with your study. And that, again, is worth 10 points or 10% of the grade. Again, I'm just jumping in redundantly to promise that there's a lot more details about this to come. We're just going over the big picture still. Then the next thing you're going to do with my help is develop a method to study your topic, and that's going to be worth 20% of the grade. And then you carry out the study procedure. You collect your data, and that's worth another 20% of the grade. Then you analyze your results and determine your conclusions, thinking about what it means for practice. That's worth 20% of the grade. And then finally, this is the last bullet, I promise, you're going to prepare a formal presentation about your project, which will walk people, using relevant handouts or visual aids as you need, walk through a synopsis of the question, your procedure, your result and conclusions to at least 3, and you can do more than 3, but at least 3 colleagues of your choice. More details about that in a bit too. But the thing I like about that is it gives you a chance to really spread what you learn to other people that can benefit from it. I like the collegiality component of that. And again, having done that helps you fulfill the requirements of the PIP. And then you're going to submit the presentation that you've made to that audience, the same one to me. No more extra writing or busy work or anything like that. I'll get the same presentation they do. So that, again, we're still talking about an overview of everything. We're going to get more specific. But as you note at the bottom, it's important that we do this in sequence. So you wouldn't, for example, develop your method before you had your research support in place. And you wouldn't analyze your results before you actually did your procedure. So we're going to make sure that we do this in those bullets in the order that they're listed there. So we're getting more specific now. When we've got the course syllabus, if you could turn over to the pages in the course syllabus now, you can go forward in the syllabus to the part where it says syllabus, and we've got some dates and some scheduling on there. Let's look at the schedule and think of the timing of how we're going to do those different things that we just reviewed in the bullets. So the first day of class, here we are. We're introducing ourselves to everything we're up to and talking about the plan. So we're doing that now. And then as you can see, very soon I'm going to be asking you to submit your research question. We're jumping right in. One of my reasons for jumping in so quickly is I want to open up as much of a window as possible for you to collect the data. So as much time as we can to collect the data, and we're going to build everything around that. So I'm going to have you submit your research question to me first. And again, more details on that to come too, of course. We're still kind of going over the overview at this point. Once you've submitted that question, you can see that there's some information there for you about looking for good research support. And at that point, very soon after that, the next assignment, as you can see when you look down the syllabus dates, is for you to submit the 2 research study sites that support what you were doing in this study. So in terms of once we get your question, then we can find the research support. And then soon after that, there's some information about doing the method, and I'll talk to you about where to find all that. And then you'll submit an assignment that is your methodology assignment of how you're going to go about with terms of participants and materials and setting and procedure. And then you'll keep hearing back from me, of course, as we're doing this. Every time you submit something, hear back from me, and I'll talk to you about how that's going to happen on our site in a minute. And then we've got a chunk of time, once you've looked over your research method and my feedback about it, for you to start gathering your data. As you look through the dates on the syllabus, you can see the time we have for data collection. And I try to open up as much of a window as I can to maximize the data collection parts. So you'll be doing that at your site where you've decided to do your study during that time. And then after that, you can see a little further along, we start thinking about data analysis together with some information I've got for you on the site. And then eventually you'll submit your assignment of your results and conclusions. If you look where it says Assignment 3 Results and Conclusions, I wanted to be a little more specific there just to give you the flavor of how I'm going to ask you to write to me. In each case, whenever we have an assignment, I've got specific questions for specific items for you to respond to. And I just, for this place, I just put them in there just so you could see them up front. So you see there's 3 bolded questions about your results and then 3 bolded questions about your conclusions. Again, that's listed underneath Assignment 3, Interpreting Results and Conclusions on the syllabus date. So I don't ever really need you to write a ton to me. I'm a less is more kind of guy, which means that instead of asking you to write a whole bunch, let's do it 2 ways. One is, once you've said something to me once in writing, let's assume that I've got it and you don't have to feel the pressure to repeat it. And secondly, instead of writing me a whole book about every one of those questions, I'm just going to ask you instead to be very specific in your answers, making sure that you deal with each of the questions I pose here, as you can see each of those bulleted points I posed, and be very specific about your answers. So I'm after more specific things than I am for long things. Hope that makes sense okay. More details about that to come too. And then as I'm back through our overview again, you can see that once you submit the assignment, your results and conclusions assignment, you'll hear back from me. And then the last piece is I've got some support for you about making research presentations. And I'll ask that at that point near the end of the class, for you to make that presentation to 3 or more of your colleagues and submit that same presentation to me. And again, those are all the pieces, no other surprises. I'm not going to add anything in there and nothing extra to type up or anything like that. And of course, I'm going to help you every step along the way. So I just want to go back briefly to that research presentation, because one thing that comes up sometimes in people's questions is that I mentioned that you're going to submit the same research presentation to me that you did for your colleagues. And that's true. But sometimes when people do the research presentation with their colleagues, they find that someone brings up an idea that they wish they would have brought up, or someone asks a question that gives them another thought. So you have the flexibility of doing a little extra on that research presentation before you send it to me if you want to. You can send me the same one you did for them, or you can augment it a little bit after your presentation when you send it to me. Again, when we get closer to that, of course, I'm going to give you a specific setup for this. So when we think about our time frame and we look through all that, it brings me right around to office hours. My office hours are virtually always, which means I'm easy to catch up with. You're a priority for me, and I don't want you to hesitate to get in touch. I'm not going to think less of you if you have questions. I'll actually be impressed that you care. So sometimes people feel guilty about, oh, I don't want to bother Jim on the weekend. But if you're doing the work then, whenever you're doing the work, I'm available. I won't be upset if you email me at any point or any time. And I'll keep a close watch on it and try to get back to you as fast as I can, because I know your time is tight too. So don't hesitate. I'll be right there to help you out. And you can email me right through the course website. And my email, of course, is jbarton@ric.edu. Along with that, I want to also mention that you can submit, even though I just went over the dates with you, and you can see them in the syllabus when you go back over it, you can submit things early if you want to. If you want to submit an assignment early, that'd be great with me. In fact, you'd be doing me a huge favor. It helps me keep on top of everything. I'm kind of counting on the fact some of you will want to get things done early. It helps me out a lot. So don't hesitate. You don't have to submit early. The deadlines that I've listed there are deadlines, but if you want to, that'd be great from my point of view. But it's important that, again, that you submit in sequence, that you don't submit one assignment before you've gotten back another thing from me and we move on from there. So you can ask for help at any point, and I'd be glad to help you too. So at any time, just get in touch if I can help you with any piece of this as we're going. If something doesn't make sense or you need a look extra support. Sometimes people email me with questions and I realize it's something I wasn't clear about with everyone, and I can send a group mail out to everybody. So it helps me too. And then what you submit, and I'm going to talk about how to submit in just a minute. What you submit is then what I grade. So what we can't do is have you submit something and then say, can you check this out before you grade it? But let's have me, if you've got questions about something, then connect with me before you submit it. Once you submit it to the site, then that is the document I will grade. Now, I'm talking a lot about the site, so let's look at the site navigation a little bit. There's some tips in there, and again, back to the introductory materials folder, you see a document that says site navigation tips there. And if you open that up, I just want to walk through that fairly quickly just to make sure that makes sense in terms of where we're heading. So I put these site navigation tips together based on the idea that this might be for someone who's never used Blackboard before. You're probably more computer, or at least as or more computer savvy than I am. Probably you can tell from this video. So some of this document may be really simple for you, but I wanted to come from it from the point of view of someone who hasn't really done much with Blackboard and perhaps not much online before. So when you get the site navigation tips document open, you see the first information is about how to get into our course website, but of course you're already there. You wouldn't be listening to me. So we've got that piece down. And then I've got, I'm looking at the site navigation tips document now. You can see on the left hand, on the page there, I've listed the different folders of information that you're seeing in front of you on the course website. And I just gave you a brief heads up about what's in each folder. And we've been talking about quite a bit of it already. But when you get down to sharing your work in progress on that folder, that's where you'll be submitting your assignments. And it'll be pretty easy to do. Everything's set up there, and I'm going to go over that setup in just a minute. But one important detail is that once you submit an assignment to sharing your work in progress, then that's where I'm going to respond to it. So when you hear back from me, you'll see a little check mark next to what your submission was. You click on that check and you'll find my response. So it isn't like if you check back and you wonder, when's Jim getting back to me? As soon as you see that little check mark, you click on that and I'll be right there. Okay? And I'll stick with the deadlines too, just like I'm asking you to. So you'll hear back from me right on schedule, I promise. So the only other thing is the RIC online resources there is just a quick link to the library, and the course email is where you connect up with me or any of your classmates. And that's all going to show up on your RIC email account. We're going to do everything through your RIC email account. And essentially what that means is that if you want to make it so there's a link between your RIC email account and the account you normally use, you can go right ahead and do that. But make sure you can access your RIC email somehow, because that's how I'll be corresponding with you. And there's some information at the on site navigation tips there on how to send an email. It's pretty basic, but I wanted to include that too. And then the next thing it mentions, and I just want to highlight this too, is that I'm going to be sending out a number of group emails. Along with those individual responses to your assignments, I'm going to be sending out some information to you in general. Quite a bit, actually. You'll be sick of hearing from me. Some tips, some encouragement, some ideas, just some support to help you complete the assignments on top of what's on the website. So please check for those on a regular basis. And sometimes they end up in people's junk mail folders, so just check to make sure I'm not in there. Let's look at it this way. If you're not hearing from me, either you're not seeing checks next to those boxes of your assignments, or if you're not getting those group emails from me on a regular basis, could you just email me directly? Again, it's jbarton@ric.edu. I won't blame you. We'll just figure out why it's not happening, because I want to make sure that we're in constant touch during the course of the semester. Then I've got some other directions here in this document about site navigation tips. It just talks about moving around within the course website and downloading documents, and then how to post your work in progress. And as you can see there, that basically once you click on that link, that folder, it gives you some choices: the research topic, your research support, your method, your results and conclusions, your action project presentations. You'll see all those options there. And then you just click on the right one of them, and then click on Create Thread. That's how you're going to do this. And then you write the name of the assignment and the space for the subject. That'd be really handy for me if you'll do that for me. Just put your research topic for the first one, for example. And then here's a critical one: is there's an open space there, just like with an email that for you to type into, and it's very tempting just to type into that. I suggest strongly you don't. Instead, cut and paste from a Word document into that, or make an attachment. The reason for that is that if you start typing into the actual Blackboard site in that message field, sometimes Blackboard goes down and you lose all the work you did, which can be a little bit maddening, very frustrating. So again, cut and paste or attach. And then don't forget to hit submit when you're done, because otherwise whatever you're sending won't come to me. So again, just a little bit of information to help you think about getting around the Blackboard site. Some of this may be old news to you, but I wanted to include it just in case. So let's think about next. If I could take you to the first assignment now. So you're going to go over to the assignments folder, open that up, and then click on assignment number 1. At the top, it's going to be our first steps. Let's get more specific now about how we're going to begin. So once you've got that document open, you can see a deadline there and also the setup for assignment part 1. And so you're going to read a document first for me to get started. It's called a Sample of Research Study Questions. It's in the Research Study Information folder, where a lot of information is going to be to help you out. So once you get that document open, it talks to you about what makes a good question specifically. And it also helps you think about some other questions people have asked in the past. I tried to include a whole bunch of them from a whole bunch of different programs, just so you get a sense of what some of the things people have studied in the past are. Now, I'm not expecting you to adopt one of those questions in that document, unless one really appeals to you. I'm expecting you're going to come up with your own individual one, but I just wanted you to see what other people have done because it kind of makes it easier once you do. And then you're going to give me, based on what you're thinking about what your interest in your topic is, you're going to give me your research question as it stands at this point. And I've got some information there, like I said, in that document. Like, we don't want it to be a yes or no question. And we don't want it to be something you already know the answer to, because then we're just spinning your wheels. And we want to make something that's actually doable in the time span we have, given everything else you've got going on. But once you've given me the question, the next step is for you briefly, in a paragraph or two, to justify why that question is valuable to you, why it addresses a specific need you see. So when I'm thinking about grading that assignment, basically what I'm looking for are two things. I'm looking for you to be really focused, to have a good focus and a clear one for your question, and a real sense of purpose in your justification. You need to explain to me, really sell me on the idea of why this is such an important thing to study. That's what I'm looking for here. And again, you're going to send that to me. I'm going to respond to it pretty rapidly, and you'll hear back from me. And there's a date there on that page where you can see you'll hear right back from me on that. Notice there's also an optional piece here, which has nothing to do with your grade in the course, and you can completely ignore if you want to. But I have a little information about action research itself. My former PhD student, Nancy Noonan, Dr. Nancy Noonan now, she teaches English at Rogers High School. She did a chapter for her dissertation about the origins, kind of an update on what action research is all about and how it's fairly controversial because it suggests that the person that's the most expert to study a particular situation is the person already working that situation. That's you. That you could be just as objective and as much of an expert about your own workplace as someone coming in from the outside. And so this chapter talks about that. It talks about how the ideas came to be and how they got generated and what the controversies are around it, because you can imagine it is a little controversial, the idea. If you're interested in that, I'd love to see your reactions. But again, if that isn't interesting to you or you're too busy, you can skip right over it. Again, it has nothing to do with your grade. So that's the very first thing we're going to do. And if you go back to the syllabus, you can see when that's to be submitted. And then also it says when I will be responding to it. So it's on the assignment and it's listed on the syllabus too. If you go to the next piece, that's the research support piece. And so we're following, this is part 2 of assignment 1. Once you'll have heard back from me about your question, and then the next thing you're going to do, and you can see the dates for submission right there. I'll ask you to submit this to me by the date it says on there, is to post citations for 2 published articles you've located. 2 articles that really help you think about your study. And I know you could give me a lot more. I could ask for 30, you'd give them to me, right? But that seems to me to be busy work too. I'd rather find 2 that really help you think. So let me be specific about that. That I'm looking for studies that are connected to your topic, but don't just give you information you already know, but help you think about something you want to do. And as you know, there's a lot of kinds of research out there. Just to overstate the case a little bit, some kinds of research over here are the kinds that you can't even tell what they're talking about. Who knows, it's kind of vague. And then other studies seem so obvious to you. You can tell somebody was in your room somebody was in your setting for like 15 minutes would know that. We're looking for studies in the middle, things that have ideas you haven't thought about. Those ideas might be about how to frame a study, how to collect data, then maybe there's even an instrument there you could take and modify, or even how to think about the results and to analyze results. We're looking for things that are specifically going to help you. So you can see I've got some directions there in Assignment 1, Part 2 that talk to you about how to link up. You can go through the RIC library, or you don't have to, though. You can go through Google Scholar, or if you have a site on your own professionally, you can use that. And again, we're looking for the 2 best resources to submit. And then here's what you're going to do when you submit them. This is the citations, right? You don't have to do a summary of them. Again, I think that's busy work. I know you could, but let's not do summaries of them instead. And you can see explain briefly but specifically, I'm down to this bullet now, take them each separately, how each study connects with and helps you think about your research. What are the influential ideas? How does it connect to either what you intend to do, the method of doing it, or the outcome of your study, as you hope it's going to turn out? And again, I'm looking for you to be as specific as you can there about how this helps you think. So for instance, you wouldn't say, this helps me think about my method, but I want to know how. How does it help you think about your method? What's it do for you in thinking about how you're putting your method together? And again, you're going to submit that information to the research support thread in the sharing your work in progress folder. And you can see the date for that there when I'll get back to you. So that's how we're getting started right there. First with the research question and then the research support. And as you can see at the note at the bottom of the page we were just looking at, everything else is posted right on the course website, right in sequence, and it moves us along. You can always look back at the course syllabus for the submission schedule. For example, if we did look back at the course syllabus and we're looking down after you submit your research support, you can see the information there. It says in the next section, says, okay, you're going to look now for the information on methodology I've posted in the research study information folder, and that'll start you off to think about your method. I'm hoping all this makes sense, long distance across the internet like this, but if it doesn't, of course, you can email me and I'll help you sort any of this out that isn't making sense. I want to come back to one more thing though, and that is when you get to your research support piece, the assignment I was just talking about, the two things I'm looking for are that you've chosen really quality studies. Not newspaper articles or someone else's blog, but actual studies that have been conducted by people in your field and been vetted by publications in your field. So we're looking for two quality studies there. And also the clarity part, which is where you're really going to make a specific connection between something and the ideas in each of those pieces and your own thinking about your own study. That's going to make that work for us. So let's think about next step. I've already talked about how to post all that, and you can go back over that information and look that back over on the site navigation tips. And I'm going to review the whole process now, just because it's the first time and I want to go over everything. If we look back at the syllabus again, you can see exactly what dates we're going to do all the pieces, and all the assignments that hopefully make sense in terms of when you're going to submit them and when you're going to hear back from me. And the sequence makes sense, I hope, at this point. First we come up with your question, then your research support, then your method. Then you have a chance to actually do that method and conduct a study, continue data collection, and then the interpreting results and conclusions, and then ultimately you putting that all together into a research presentation. Those are all the pieces of this. There's two kind of fundamental challenges that people have experienced doing this in the past, so let me mention them both right now. The first one is the time frame for getting the data. As you can see, even though, like I said, I opened up as much of a time frame for that as I could, it still is not a very big window, is it? It can be tricky to fit that into your schedules because you're still trying to do your job and maybe even trying to have a life of some sort. And on top of that, I'm asking you to collect data. So we need to keep that in mind in terms of how big the scope of your study is. We don't want to get you overwhelmed. Again, a good researcher is going to fit what they can do into what they regularly do in their work. And you're going to do the same thing. So that time frame can be tricky because it really doesn't give us a huge chunk of time. We need to be realistic about how much we can possibly collect during that time frame. The other thing that's tricky for people is getting an audience for the presentation, because we know your colleagues are just as busy as you are. So you might want to be prepared to call in a few favors here to get people in the room with you. Again, I'm hoping if you can get more than 3 people, it'd be great with me. You get your whole staff, I'll be thrilled, but we need at least 3. And it doesn't actually have to be people you work with on a daily basis. We just want people in your field. So if your cousin's hairdresser's brother-in-law's sister just happens to be in the same field as you are and you can corral them into attending your presentation, that's okay with me. Again, we want people that can be affected and impacted by your ideas. Could even be your building administrator if they're willing to attend. And also in terms of thinking about how to do it, you're going to make a formal presentation, but where you make it is up to you. You could make it at your work site for sure, but you might also be doing it someplace elsewhere, a little more informally, like at your house with a few glasses of wine for everyone. Whatever it takes to get them there, I will understand, because I know that part's a little tricky too. The other thing we need to make sure is that one of those audience members is going to email me quickly with some reactions. And when we get to that presentation part, you'll see there's some very clear information about what to have them email to me about when we get to that point. So that's basically all the information, except I want to go over how to get an A, because that's important too, right? So here's some key ways that you can get an A in this course. One is check for my emails. Like I said, they're going to be coming through the Rick email system through Blackboard, and they'll be coming pretty regularly, and they will have extra support and a few tips about the assignments just to keep us all on track. So check those out. Those will really help you with the assignments. Secondly, make sure you post the assignments to the site on time. Not to my email, but to the site. We just talked about how to do that. And stay right on schedule, because I'm going to stay on schedule too during this tight time frame. That'll help you get an A too. By the way, if you get stuck, like if you have a personal crisis, because it happens, don't disappear. Keep me in the loop. I can work with you, but don't disappear and then show up 2 weeks later and say, hey, what did I miss? Make sure I know what's going on if something critical is going on. You can see my cat behind me there, right? She's my research assistant. That's Lulu, my cat, climbing around behind us here. So make sure you communicate with me. Stay in touch. Don't leave me out of the loop. If something big happens, just shoot me a message. Let me know what's going on, and we can work around it. But don't disappear and then pop back up, because then you'll be way behind. And the other piece, above all, I want to again come back and emphasize the importance of explicitly answering each of the questions, each of the prompts I pose for each assignment. Like I said before, you don't need to write me a book, but you need to be specific and deal with each of the questions I'm posing. I tried to be very specific about that to save you time and make it clear what I wanted. And when you do that, you're ensuring yourself of getting a good grade in this course. So I'm thinking that's just about it. I'm going back over my notes just to make sure I missed anything. I think I got it all done. If you have any issues, any questions, please get right in touch, and you'll be hearing from me. And I think we're good. All right, I'll see you online.